So I think affirmative action is actually a structural remedy to inequality. So I think the inequality is historic and happened over a couple of centuries, 4 centuries or so. I am though, so I don't think affirmative action creates more inequality. I think it actually starts to level the playing field. But I am open to affirmative action not being just about race, to it being also about, I mean, it is about gender too in its current form, but I'm open to adding class as a marker and as a form of inequality that affirmative action helps to address, in addition to the racial and gender kinds. That answers your question. I can sit here quiet for a long time, so.
Hi.
Hi.
Why are we still using color or the words of color to define people who are non-Caucasian people? That's, if you're, I mean, it seems, you seem to be adamant about language.
Mm-hmm.
So why the I word? Why not the C word?
Right. That's a good question, definitely. I think, you know, this is how I actually did some research once into how people of color came to be a phrase and used. And it was used actually first by Frantz Fanon, the theorist and political economist, and to describe the global South, really, the peoples of the global South. And then it came into, what I remember is that it came into common usage in the States after around the mid-70s, early 80s, kind of as an alternative to third world, actually. So Asian, African American, Latino, and Native American people had their group identities and ethnic identities, you know, within those, and were looking for ways to form a bigger constituency than they could each do in their own racial groups or ethnic groups. And so first they grouped themselves together, this a little bit before my time, as third world people. And then because third world has that kind of numeric hierarchy to it, first, second, third, looked for something else and settled on people of color, and then that got to start being used heavily. I don't think it's perfect myself. Like Middle Eastern people always come and ask me if they belong because they identify as Persians, and it's not quite a racial category. And among Latinos, there's a huge range of actual racial groups, right? And physical phenotypes. So I don't think it's perfect, but we haven't yet found something better as a range of political movements that are trying to come together. Some people don't use it to describe themselves, and I respect that. And I mean, the one alternative would be to list people out every time we talked about us, and that's just unwieldy. So when you're thinking about changes in language, it's a challenge to bring the values and principles together with the actual words, the actual phrase. And I think we're still in that challenge. Are people of color? Did you want to follow up?
Yeah.
Is there time?
There's nobody else?
There are actually four. There are actually other hands. Sorry. Thanks for raising that.
I wanted to thank you for your talk. It's very timely. I think we have a lot of different experiences, and it's usually the starting part that's the hardest. So my question to you is, I mean, you really talk, you overlaid a lot of things, but I think one of the things that was very prevalent for me is there was a shift in thinking. And your story kind of suggests that it happened because of your friends, but we know that things don't shift very quickly.
Right.
So I was hoping that you could give me an example of the shift and how it turns out to be. What is it that you were afraid that you were going to be giving up before you made the shift? What actually did you gain when you made the shift?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, so you know I wasn't conscious of all this at the time, right? So I'm you know, partly making it up now because I've forgotten some of the details. But my impression is that you know, silence on race gets you some cover. It gets you some cushion from the attacks on people of color. It's sort of like how, you know, actually I don't think I want to analogize it, but so, you know, you watch the debate and you see people fighting hard over these racial questions and you hear the N-word thrown around and you learn about the history of, you know, I mean, I knew something about race in the United States. I had studied Rosa Parks at least in 4th grade, and I knew slavery had happened and things like that. So, so I think that pretending you don't see it gives you access to people. So people would say to me, like I remember in high school, these girls saying, we don't think of you as Indian. You know, we just think of you like us. And I wasn't like them, so that meant they didn't actually see me because I was Indian, you know? But they could say that to me because I wasn't going to challenge it and I wasn't going to, and so, you know, when you hear that, you understand, like, okay, so if you did see me as Indian, I wouldn't be part of us, right? I wouldn't be the same as us anymore. So I think I feared giving up that kind of privilege and access. And then what I gained is, well, what I gained was myself in certain ways, and I gained a whole legacy and tradition of racial justice work in this country that has so much to it, and it's so sustaining. I'll tell you a story that you guys might like. I had the opportunity recently to interview Harry Belafonte, and he's 84 now, and he's kind of frail. You know, he walks with a cane, and along with Harry or Mr. B, as we call him, came Gus Newport. Gus Newport used to be the mayor of Berkeley and was Black Panther, and you know, Gus is, Mr. B's in 84, Gus is probably 70 or so. And I did the interview with Mr. B, and you know, he talked about his way of seeing things in it, and that was incredible. And he's 84, and you know, icon of the civil rights movement. So I'm like sitting in front of him, talking to him, like having this great experience. And then Gus, then we interviewed Gus, and Gus started talking about how Mr. B's mentor had been Paul Robeson, the singer and actor and communist. And Gus tells me Gus's mentor was Malcolm X. And he told me the story about Malcolm X, about how when they met, Malcolm X was going around to meetings in Rochester where Gus lived, and Gus would sort of shoot his mouth off at the meetings, and Malcolm X would tell him, listen, you're a smart guy, you're gonna do a lot of great things, but you can't just be talking out of like the you know, right side of your brain like that. You gotta like think about what you're saying and why you're saying it, not just be saying it to be the big man in this meeting. And Gus was laughing, you know, he's saying, oh, this is Malcolm X telling me this. So I was sitting in that studio with these men and thinking about, you know, the line going Gus Newport to Malcolm X, to Harry Belafonte, to Paul Robeson, to Frederick Douglass. And because I was sitting in the room with Gus and Harry Belafonte, I could be part of that legacy, you know?